Hi, Whiskey Sisters.
Hello.
How are you?
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
It's good to be back. It's good to be here. I don't know about you guys, but the sun is shining through my window, which is really nice.
It's gloomy and rainy.
Oh, we had that all last week, but I'm happy to be here with you ladies.
Yes.
Tonight, I'm happy to have a cocktail in my hand and sip along together and have a really, I think we're going to have a good, meaningful conversation tonight.
I think the whiskey's going to help with that. So for sure, just to get that going. Sailor, what are you sipping on?
So I made, mirror. There we go. You'd think I would have learned by now.
Are you not the big orange?
Oh my God. It's a big, huge orange because I just feel like I needed that fresh citrus, right? And I want to eat it like a little kid. I have what I call the Vision of Love. And it's Uncle Nearest whiskey, and it's a licorice syrup and black walnut bitters and an orange liqueur, and I muddled a little mint in it. I used the 1856. The licorice is for my heritage as Greek. And then I wanted to bring some fresh flavors in there and the earthiness from the black walnut bitters. And it came out really delicious. I only used a touch. I'm actually not a huge fan of black licorice, so probably makes me a bad Greek. I don't know. But I like it when it goes along with other flavors. But it can tend to dominate. So I posted my recipe on Facebook and Instagram. Definitely just do like a little drop of it, I would say.
Okay. So you're just doing ouzo back in Greece.
I've never been an ouzo or a Ricard or a Sambuca fan. So yeah, I just can't, I don't know. But if I have it like inside baked goods, we have it traditionally in baked goods, then I really enjoy it. But it has the tendency to take over and be a dominant flavor. As long as it does well with others, then I'm enjoying it.
So it's a bully. We've decided that all licorice spirits are bullies.
I would agree. They are definitely, you do not forget them. But my family would tell me, my great-grandparents, so they would give us little nips as kids. Probably so, we'd go to bed early. I'm kidding. They saw it as healthful, So she would give us little tiny bits of ouzo and say, it's so gross. She would be like, it will keep the worms away. And as kids, we were like, oh my God, that's horrible. I remember freaking out about it. And, it's just your typical, like a digestivo, like the idea of an aperitif as well. It's in that, along those lines. And, they're right. If you have a heavy meal and you sip just a little bit of an ouzo and have some fruit, it does help you digest. So, medicinal properties.
Yeah, we'll stick to that.
How about you ladies?
I'm drinking Victoria's Teacup.
Oh, I love that one.
Well, if you remember, Sailor, I know you skipped out. Well, I'm sorry, you were on your honeymoon, but if you remember, this was the cocktail that the Midwest won for in our national sales conference last year.
Rub it in, Chastity.
My counterpart Ian here in Chicago. So it's Uncle Nearest 1884, Saint Germain elderflower liqueur, white Bianco vermouth, and dry Curaçao. Stirred, served up with the baby's breath garnish and a lemon twist. It's really good for a stirred cocktail for the season. It's light. I like to think of it like a blonde whiskey cocktail, right?
Ooh, I like that.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, the color's beautiful. Yeah.
So I remember first tasting the cocktail, and I resentfully loved it because I knew it was going to win. And I was like, what? Damn Midwest. Because Ian and Chastity, they make phenomenal cocktails. So we know that. So for those of you tuning in, when we have our national sales meeting, we have our different divisions, our different teams. We have, just for fun, a cocktail competition. And, Ian and Chastity's team has taken it 2 years in a row. So I keep saying that it's back for you guys, but it's such a delicious cocktail because it's floral, but it's light, but it's incredibly well balanced. And it's beautiful. So
2 years in a row.
2 years in a row.
That's
The West
what it's doing.
The West is coming this year. We're coming for you guys.
Bring it.
I remember at the competition because what we did for the West was we actually used an Oloroso sherry. And Ian was watching. He said to me, he was like, "Oh, damn," because he knows that we like the same flavor profile. He was like, "God damn it, what are they going to do with it?" So it's all out of love.
Yeah, of course. Yes.
Of course. So I was feeling a little French. I just was.
Okay.
I miss Paris so much. And I also wanted something really bright. So I call this cocktail Hope and Light. So I just kind of whipped it up. It's Uncle Nearest 1884, which is our small batch release with Java de Pêche and Sous. So it's like beautiful French aperitifs and liqueurs together. You know, I wanted it shaken because I wanted a little bit more water dilution than if it was stirred. And then just with a simple lemon peel. So it's really lovely. And I wanted something bright and hopeful.
I like that.
Well, cheers, ladies.
Very nice. Cheers, everybody. Cheers. Oh, I'm doing it the wrong way again. Sailor. Come on now.
When I do it, this glass looks so big, guys. It's look at this.
It does. As big as your head.
We got to talk about this.
Oh, man. So we just passed, we had Juneteenth celebrations on Friday.
Yes.
Chastity, you were as busy as I was, I think. Boy, it was a crazy time, which is a beautiful thing for our brand. We had so many celebrations and everybody was all over the place. I particularly loved the talk you had from the DuSable Museum in Chicago. Just learning about the history of the museum was so cool. Can you just tell us, so those folks that missed it, it's still out there on our YouTube channel and on Facebook, but it was a really great way.
So, yeah, I really enjoyed it. And we had Perry Ermer, the CEO of the DuSable Museum, and Dr. Kim Delaney. She's a historian and doctor. And they both came on and shared the history of the museum and the significance of Juneteenth and how important it is. And we turned Dr. Delaney into a whiskey drinker.
I saw that.
She wasn't a whiskey drinker. And I actually got an email from her today that stated, you know, she loved the whiskey and she can't fake anything. So her response and her reaction was genuine. So,
aww.
And she's going to be purchasing. So, yeah,
yay.
Girl, go
more whiskey women.
Yeah, whiskey women. That's right.
Love it.
It was a great show. And then, if anyone caught it, Bova is Fawn's younger sister. She's also a great celebrity DJ in California and an ambassador for us as well in California. And we actually had the opportunity to, she had the opportunity to DJ and I had the opportunity to make a cocktail on the Ebony Magazine platform. So we did that on Saturday.
That was really, really cool.
Yeah, that was super cool. So overall, a great weekend and a great celebration honoring the significance of Juneteenth.
Loved it. I learned a lot about, I had forgotten, I lived in the South for quite a while when I was younger, and I don't remember quite where it was. I had learned about the significance of what you eat and drink on Juneteenth. And there was something in my memory rattling around. So I went and looked it up again. And so I did a cocktail with hibiscus because that was tradition of the first Jubilee in Galveston, Texas, to drink the hibiscus tea. And then this Sunday, it was Father's Day. And so we had my stepfather over and my sister and her kids. And I cooked for everybody and made black-eyed peas.
Ooh,
The black-eyed peas attract security and wealth. And then I made pies. I'm not a sweets person, but I made pies for everybody else, which reminds you of the sweetness of life. So I got to teach the kids about it as well, which is really good for them. So it was really fun. Everybody enjoyed it.
Cool. That's awesome.
And
I just have to ask one question. What type of meat do you use for your black eyed peas?
Well, I don't, because I don't eat meat.
Oh, okay.
So sometimes I'll do a little maple syrup and a little liquid smoke to kind of replicate that ham hock.
Mm-hmm.
I was taught to do it. Now, if I'm cooking it for a large group of people and I know like the majority are non-vegetarians, I'll do like a tiny pot for myself and a big pot for everybody else. And I'll use that the way I was taught to do it. But for myself, I didn't do it. Not this time.
Okay. Interesting.
But I made greens too. So, and again, I do the same thing without if I'm not using the ham.
Okay,
So.
you invited to the cookout.
I was taught well.
Awesome. May, what did you have going on in California?
You know, we're really touch and go right now. We are really keeping an eye out on the infection rates going on in COVID and recovering from, unfortunately, some of the property damage that has happened. And it's been an interesting time because I also see like the semblance of life that is continuing. And you see people so hungry for connection and conversation. So some accounts are opening up again. At the same time, I actually took this as a really great opportunity to learn more about the history of LA. And I was watching this documentary called 92 about the 92 riots because I was still really young at that time and I grew up in New York City. So I knew, you know, when you have like little clips of information about events and you don't really know what it all comprehensively means until you're a lot older. Mm-hmm. So in 92, I remember Rodney King and I remember hearing something about riots, but I didn't really understand everything that went into that. And so it was so fascinating to me because, you know, I drive past where a lot of the big occurrences happened in LA. And it was great for me as a person who's lived in Los Angeles for so many years to revisit that part of history and see how it parallels now still to this time. And in some ways, it was very hard to digest to see how much still has not changed as much as we'd like it to. But then at the same time, I also think about how diverse the protesters were at the riots nationwide, internationally, right? If people are protesting during a pandemic, they mean business, you know? And then also what we've done at the company with the Nearest and Jack initiative. So it's almost like there's always a counterbalance. There's always a way that we can come and be the agents of good and change and progression and light as well.
For sure.
That's it. It's a good point, May. And I was going to ask you guys, because we wanted to, and let me explain to the viewers, like what our intention was here tonight. We've been doing a lot of work with our company because we are Black owned and we are run by women. Our leadership board is women, and we have an incredible amount of diversity in our company. We are leaders in so many ways. As you just mentioned, we partnered up with Jack Daniels and Brown-Forman to create an initiative to literally change the face of the whiskey and American spirits industry by cultivating more diversity and putting people from diverse backgrounds in leadership roles and specifically, reaching out to educate and incubate businesses and things like that. And also, our founder and CEO Fawn has been very outspoken during this period, as most of us have, and she comes from a position of hope. And the way she leads is so different. And I continue to work. I continue to learn so much from the way she handles things because I'm the polar opposite. So I come at everything with, and maybe it's my upbringing and we both grew up in New York City and in immigrant families. And it was like, everybody has an upbringing that can be difficult, but I'm like, punch through the glass ceiling, brah. And Fawn's like, no, build a house next door that's taller. And I'm like, what? That's so easy. Why didn't I think of it?
I like that.
That's such a great analogy, Sarah.
I know, right?
It's so true. It's so true.
It is very true. Yeah.
The immigrant identity is struggle, and that is not unwarranted, because and that comes from, our parents coming from countries that have more times, more likely than not, come from civil discourse, long wars, famine, collapsed economy, and that plays a part into it. I'm so curious to ask you ladies, because, Sailor's talking about how diverse we are, and you can see on the screen, like, we are very individual women who have, unique backgrounds that all make up what it means to be an American woman. And I was just wondering if you ladies can just touch upon what your childhood was like, where you grew up, what your influences were, and like what you knew about your sense of identity.
Yeah, Chastity, do you want to start?
Sure. That's a really good question. So I grew up south side of Chicago. I was in a 2-parent home. For a short time, my mom was a single mother until I call him my pops, my pawpaw, until he came into our lives when I was around 7. So my mother was a hard worker. I remember she worked 2 jobs to support me and my sister, prior to her meeting my pops. So she was a great example of what many women do when they're single women, when they're single moms. They have to, pull up their boots by the straps and go out there and make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned from her to, be diligent, to never give up, to work hard. She was a great example of that because I saw her work hard. And at times I thought, I didn't understand it, I remember saying to her, and I don't know if she remembers this, but I remember one day, it was probably, a day she came home early from work because she worked a day job and then worked a night job in retail. And I remember saying to her one day, "Mom, you're neglecting me." And I guess I really didn't know what that word meant. I probably heard it somewhere, but she's like, "No, I'm not. I'm working hard to take care of you." And as an adult now, I understand that no, she wasn't neglecting me, but I was just wanting that intimacy, that special quality time with my mom, and she had to work hard to provide for us. And although she, couldn't be there, sometimes in that way, I felt her love. And I wouldn't be the woman that I am today had it not been for the great example that she's been.
So so where you grew up, Chastity, were you in a diverse area, or were you in a mostly Black area or mostly white area?
In the early stages of my childhood, from birth to about 11, 12, we grew up on the south side of Chicago in a not diverse area at all.
Okay.
Then around junior high school, we moved to an area that was more diverse. So I was able to go to 7th and 8th grade with lots of Polish and Arabic and the Latin community, and then into high school as well. So I'm very grateful that was a turning period where I was able to be exposed to all sorts of races and backgrounds at that time, because it really did make a huge impact on just, I guess, social skills and being exposed to different backgrounds and different people. So yeah.
Kind of makes you think like children need that.
They do.
need to know there's something else out there. There's something that looks the same as them and different as them, and experience different cultures and different communities. I think it's so crucial to the development. I think, I think you it harms you in no way. I think it gives you so much more, just like listening to different types of music, eating different types of food. I mean,
yes.
How is that ever a bad thing?
Yeah. I mean, it's not. But then, I dealt with, as the only Black girl in some of my classes, I dealt with things like, "Oh, you're a white Black girl." Or I was called an Oreo. I was white on the inside and Black on the outside. Or I spoke too proper. Or I talked like a white girl, which is, it's crazy that And I was getting that from, some of my Black classmates were the boys. They did that to tease me. And it's interesting that people associate speaking articulate with speaking white.
Mm-hmm.
It's just crazy to me.
Mm-hmm.
And still to this day, as an adult, I still get that from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
You act like a white girl, you talk like a white girl. And I don't understand that because there's all sorts of Black people,
Mm-hmm.
from all different sorts of backgrounds. And, we shouldn't associate speaking articulate with speaking white.
Mm-hmm. Oh, 100%. And I would argue that speaking articulate is speaking white, especially in today's America. I don't know if that's quite true.
Yeah.
I've experienced that with a girlfriend of mine. I'll never forget it. Very dear friend of mine. We were friends most of my childhood, and I grew up in I was very lucky in my early years that I grew up in a very diverse area, but I grew up in a Greek immigrant family, and we spoke Greek in the house, and everything was Greek, and your food was Greek, and you're Greek and that's it. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I understood why my family held on to that so much, and why that was so important for them to stay connected to their culture. But it was kind of a mind screw also, because they would assimilate when they left the house. I try and sound and look be as white as possible. So it was very confusing as a child. But one of my Black girlfriends, we were probably teenagers at the time, and the first time I heard young teenagers, I heard someone say that to her, "Oh, you just think you're white because you talk white and you're hanging out with all these white kids." And I just, I don't know why I found that to be so profound. And she just kind of, shrugged it off. Whether that's how she felt or not, I don't know. And I remember looking at this. It was a boy, a white boy, and I said to him, "Well, you're white and you're stupid, and she talks better than you do." I mean, as a kid, and he just looked at me with shock. I was like, but it was a strange thing, when in my younger years, I was lucky that I didn't suffer any form of, there was nothing really that harmed me because of what I looked like or what I ate or where I lived or what I spoke. But we moved in late elementary school to a very white area, and it was the first time I experienced racism. This first time I saw it with my own eyes, heard it, and I was made fun of for the food that I ate, and I was made fun of because I had a unibrow. Back then, I was made fun of for they said I had an afro, and I was weird, and my family was weird, and everybody talked weird, and whatever, everything was weird because they were mostly all white kids, blonde-haired, blue-eyed white kids. And it was shocking because no one had prepared me for that. And then to experience what racism looked like in a school where I gravitated towards the few Black kids that were in the school because it was natural to me, coming from New York City, coming from Queens. And the principal called my parents in to have a talk with them about it. This is 1981 in Arkansas. And my mother was blown away. She unfortunately lived in a fantasy land where she thought this didn't exist anymore after the 60s. My stepdad was from Kentucky, and he was very racist himself, it turns out. So that was an awakening in many ways. But it was the first time I saw any of that or experienced it or was told it was a bad thing. And it definitely, it changed me forever. It changed how I saw the world. It changed how I felt about my own identity. And just, I think it was the first time the anger welled up inside me that this was injustice. I saw a lot of things that are very difficult for me to talk about, and I couldn't do anything about it. And I knew it was wrong, not because someone told me, but I think it was just my instinct that it was wrong in my gut, because I believe you're taught hate. I don't believe you're born that way.
Yeah.
And there was really no one to explain it to me or help me figure it out or go through it. There was no internet. I just didn't have people to say, like, this is what's happening. And for me, that was definitely, I think, my journey into wanting to seek justice anywhere I could, and also surveying my own injustices. And that's probably where the fighter in me came from. And it was a rough year living there. If you don't, or if you're not familiar with Prescott, Arkansas, it's right outside of Hope, and they were literally burning crosses in front of Black churches. Like I said, the principal called my parents in to tell them that I was being friends with the Black kids.
Wow.
That purely just for that reason. And they must be shocked to know this, right? And then when my mother gave him an earful, you just don't do that as a woman. Mm-hmm. Then I don't know that she looked all that, like, you could tell she was some type of ethnicity, right? But where was the discussion, right? Where was there an explanation after that of this is what the N word? I heard it for the first time. I didn't even know what it meant. I was like, what is this? How do you back then reconcile with that? I don't know. And it definitely changed everything about my future going forward. And I think that it's probably one of the reasons that I recognize the problem with feminism when I was old enough to understand feminism, how it was not intersectional, but also how oppressed women were, and relatively are now as well, and how hard you have to fight for that. And this industry is certainly no different in that respect. We all recognize that we are still a minority in this industry, women, forget being a woman of color. And the experiences, and I've begun to talk about them publicly, which has been really incredibly uplifting and healing. And I think I feel comfortable talking about it because I work for a Black-owned company and I work for women. And so I feel like I have the proper platform, if I'm asked to speak about, my story and our brand or whatever, bringing that in and saying, look, there was a time when it wasn't safe for me to do what I'm doing right now. There was a time when you had to walk out of the bar in groups. There was a time when you were worried that your employer, if you happened to be alone with them for a minute, you were subjected to something that wasn't safe. And, not seeing yourself in those places either. So I'm glad that we're going to lead or work along with others in this change in our industry, because I don't know about you guys, but since the recent protests started, what I've seen uncovered in the whiskey business and whiskey fans has been disturbing, to say the least, which is a shame because I love our community and felt that we truly are a community, and whiskey unites people from all different backgrounds, and man, it's been a rough haul. I mean, have you guys experienced that as well? Have you seen any of that kind of happening in a community that you may have on social media or followers or anything like that?
I think that for me, it's an interesting position being a Chinese American woman. And the reason why I say so is because in many ways, we're not a part of the discussion when it comes to race, right? It is, it's interesting because it's like, I'm just listening to you ladies, I feel like there's such a sense of burden on all of us, just based on these preconceived notions of who you are because of your ethnicity. And some of those attributes can be something that's considered positive. So for example, like for me, I was associated with being really smart, really eager, non-violent, non-threatening, but also very submissive or, overly sexualized, right, in the media. So it was like, either I was like this dragon lady, seductress woman, who was going to kill you, or I was like, do you know what I mean? Like Anna May Wong, she has this quote how she's died like 10,000 times. And I think that you know, I think that because I am considered non-threatening as a Chinese American woman, like if you walk down the street with me, you're not like, I'm going to cross the street because here's all 5'4" of her, you know? And I think that because if I was ever caught with something in my purse that shouldn't be in there, I think I would be afforded the benefit of the doubt that it was a misunderstanding. And that is not for a lot of people. And I understand that. And I think that I think if there is that ugliness that's brewing, I actually haven't encountered it. And I'm also wondering if I haven't encountered it because I'm not as much of a part of the conversation as I need to be and as I should be. Because the other thing too is, you know, doing some research, for a really long time, Chinese people were not allowed in this country. There was the Page Act in the 1870s, 60s, where Chinese women were barred from coming into the country because there was this idea that the only women who were coming were prostitutes, and that biologically we were spreading diseases. And so we were not able to come. And then I believe in the 1880s, there was the Chinese Exclusion Act, which basically forbid Chinese men from coming, because there was also this idea of cheap labor and threatening jobs of, you know, the white men who were there, who were part of the gold rush. And for a really long time, people were not allowed in this country except for a quota. So, like, for example, for Italy, there could only be 4,000 per year that came in. And until the Immigration Act of 1965. And in 1965, there was 20,000 people from each country who was able to come. And that was built on the back of the civil rights movement. That was built on the back of the voting rights movement. And who led that? Our African-American communities. So my family could not have immigrated to this country in the 80s if it was not for the civil rights movement.
Wow.
And I don't believe that enough Asian Americans, you know, African Americans, you know, people from other countries understand that this community, our African American community, did that for all of us. Because after 1965 in the Immigration Act, reunification was incredibly important. So you were able to come here, get, you know, learn English, pass your citizenship test, become naturalized, and sponsor your wife to come, and then sponsor your brother to come, and your sisters, and all of a sudden you were bringing over your whole nuclear family. And that is only because of what Martin Luther King did. It's only because of all of these leaders. It's only because of Selma. It's only because the African-American community demanded equal rights. And I don't think people put that together. And we have to. And we have to. And I think Asian Americans, we tend to not, at least my parents' generation, we tend not to enter the fray, because they come from a mindset of don't ever draw attention to yourself. Because in China, it was the communists and the nationalists, they were at war for a very long time. They went under Mao, they went under a lot of famine. So it was like there's a mistrust of authority, but in a way of you don't draw attention to yourself. So you don't get involved in politics unless it affects the Asian American community. And, you know, you just be good. You care about safety. You care about stability. That's why they push their children to be engineers, scientists, doctors, pharmacists, because they come from such unstable countries and homes. And I think that that's absolutely wrong, because it's made us invisible. It's made us underrepresented. And also, we're not backing up our other brothers and sisters who we build our ability to bring our families from because of them. So I'm actually really happy that Sailor asked me to be a part of this conversation, because like once, you know, you're able to link that up, I don't think that you can look away, and you shouldn't.
That's interesting that you, everything you just said, you just taught me some things, but it's interesting that you just stated how your community might not be represented or might not be on the front line or be as active as you are, or many of your Chinese American friends. Do you think where do you see that going? Do you see the Chinese American community getting more involved or embracing what's going on right now? Like, where do you see your community at right now as far as?
I do. I actually, on my personal Instagram, I saw a woman and she was holding up a sign and she said, "We have to be there for our African American brothers and sisters because they built the way for us with the 1965 Immigration Act." And I was like, oh my God, thank goodness that you are holding a sign and saying that. I think the other thing too is it's a very complicated issue, which I'm glad we're talking about because we need to have complicated conversations,
Mm-hmm.
Things are going to get a little messy. That's okay. Just pour more whiskey. We'll be okay. But I think another thing too is, from my experience as an immigrant, as Chinese American immigrant, there is this sense of obligation and this sense of incredible debt that you owe to your parents. So it's like they give up their sense of identity. They give up their sense of whatever their innate talent for. Like you have people who were doctors and physicians in their country, and they come here and they're working very low wage manual labor jobs because their degrees don't transfer over here, their credentials.
Right.
And so they've given up any of that sense and all of their hopes and sacrifices on the children. So the children are taught that they are so indebted from the time they are born that there is a sense of obligation to do right by their parents, which means you only go into the 5 acceptable fields, right, that they've chosen for you. You only marry a certain ethnicity. Some will be okay that you slip through and you live a certain type of life. And everything you do is a reflection of your family social status.
Especially as a woman, because the Greeks have the same thing. I was supposed to marry a Greek man, and because I was born in the 70s, I had a little bit more on offer than my mother did. I could either marry a Greek man and be a good Greek wife and have babies and cook food and literally live in servitude to my husband and children for the rest of our lives, and then my parents and grandparents as well. Or I could go get an approved job for a Greek American that was something, like a doctor or a lawyer that was needed. It's, we need those. And, I didn't take those paths and it didn't go well for a long time. But I feel like as a woman, it's a double thing. As an immigrant woman, if you come from a culture like that, because you are it's double servitude, it's double guilt, it's double of what, my brother or my cousins did, we can definitely look at our experiences as very different. And speaking to what you say about the identity of being Chinese as well, when the census came, I can't remember which census it was. I was like, what box do I check? And I'm like, I don't know why I just assumed there was going to be a box for me to check. I had to look it up and I was like, oh my God, I don't have a race. What does that even mean? I don't understand. So we are Greeks, Italians, Albanians, Turks, and Egyptians, and of countries considered to be Middle East countries. We are all we all share the same DNA markers. And so, but we don't have our own. We are called Mediterranean, just like Middle Easterns are called Middle Eastern. But I'm like, Egyptians, like if I share with the Egyptians, how the hell am I white then? And so that was really confusing. And then I think what was so upsetting was, if you think about the Holocaust, which is so, I have Greek Jews in my family, and it's something it's a very tough thing for us to talk about. And we didn't talk about it much when I was growing up. But when you recognize that over 40,000 Greek Jews were slaughtered during the Holocaust, and we were occupied by the Germans, and you want me to check a box that says white, that's infuriating.
Yeah.
That's very, very, very infuriating to me. It also makes us invisible. What are Greeks? Nobody knows. Ask someone, what do you think about food? Oh, you think like, oh, I like gyros. Food, maybe my big fat Greek wedding now. What the hell else did you know about Greeks?
Right. You're right. You're right. You ask a lot of people. What is Greek? They're gonna think of a gyro. However you pronounce that.
You
Why
know,
are you ladies making me hungry? Because my favorite thing is to eat around
we
the
should have
world.
had
What
food.
is your favorite?
When I was
We
growing
should
up,
have-
we had like multicultural day, so everyone was responsible
Yes.
for bringing home cooked food. I never played hooky on that day. I always there. So I have an interesting question. What does it mean to be a good blank woman? Like defined in your family. Like what does that mean? Like to me, to be a good Chinese woman is the complete opposite of what I am. Like I'm a loud mouth. I am a super strong personality. You know, our old VP nicknames me, what did he nickname me? A flamethrower. So that tells you a little bit about my personality. You know, I work in the spirit industry. I'm an artist. Like I'm
single with no children right now.
Right. No baby making yet. Whiskey sipping, not baby making yet. But I've been so counter of that, and I was just curious, like, what is a good Greek woman, or what is a success in your parents' eyes or your grandparents' eyes? You know, as a woman.
Wow. That's hard to answer.
Yeah, it is.
It's really hard to answer. And there's two things that came to my mind when you said this. So I can ask my mother, who didn't.
I was like, Sailor, let's call her right now.
It's okay. I was also raised by my grandparents, so I have two different entities that helped raise me, let's say, that were very, very different from each other. Okay. So my grandparents, and this is the trip about being a woman. My grandmother was a very strong, modern, independent woman. But when her and my grandfather got engaged before he went to World War II, and she told us later in life that she didn't want to have children, but she wanted a career. So when he was at war, I know you gotta think about it for a minute to be like, okay, I'm glad I'm here. She was able to go to work during the war because most women had to. And she loved her job, loved it. And she wanted to go to college, and she wanted to go into like be a fashion writer or a museum, like all these things. And she felt compelled to do what she was supposed to do as a Greek woman and have babies, and that's it. And although she was as modern as she was, I mean, this woman was pro-choice. She was amazing. She was an amazing model. She was still holding on to the old world, as we say. And I think, and she would say things like, oh, did you see how that blah, blah, blah got married? They're doing so good. And my mom and I would say this all the time, like, they're doing so good, so well. And it meant they got married and have money, right? Even if the woman was a lawyer, let me tell you, who my aunt is a lawyer and a psychologist, an absolute badass. This woman is about my height. I think she's 5'1". She walks into Rikers, okay, and either prosecutes or defends criminals, depending. And when I can't explain it like she can, but what she does is incredible. And she is a absolute badass. It wasn't good enough because she wasn't married. Like, she has 2 degrees. Wow. She's like, she's a master's. Like, when is it good enough? You know, when she got married and had kids, everybody could relax. Oh, okay. Now she's doing good. Now she's okay. So I grew up with that. But then my mom was like, I burned my bras in the 60s. I have no idea how that helped anything. We did this and that and the civil rights and yada, 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 and all this and that. But she didn't go on to have a career. She instead had a family. So I don't know how to answer that. I mean, for me right now, if I tell my niece, being a good Greek woman means be the best person you can be and hold on to your culture. make sure that we're losing our language. That's devastating to me. Just learn about the culture of your origin and continue to honor that, but be a strong, powerful, badass woman. That's what I would say to her. That's definitely not what was said to me. No matter what I did, it definitely wasn't good enough, really, ever, because I didn't have children. So, but that's, again, like, look at the conversations happening right now. Even men of my generation are struggling with their own idea about this. And this has been discussed. So, well, look at what Fawn said the other day, you guys, when she did the panel with Fred Binnick. What was one of the most profound things that she said that spoke to me was, and I'm paraphrasing terribly, maybe you guys can quote it better, but Black women couldn't be involved in ERA because we were fighting to keep our Black men alive. And I was like, I just wanted to throw up everywhere. I was like, oh my God. And it's again, you learn. You're like, what? Like, think about that, I couldn't be a part of a movement to find equality in my gender because my race precluded me from even that. Whoa.
Yeah. That was the first time I learned about that too. And it makes me also think about our educational system, right? We were just talking about Juneteenth. I was never taught. I didn't even know what Juneteenth was until recently. And I am ashamed to say that, but I will say that because I want to leave the door open for others to be able to admit and say the same. Because it's not because we didn't want to, it's because it wasn't taught to us. And then the question is, but who's the people who write the history books?
Right, that part.
Right?
As a Black woman, I didn't know up until about 4 or 5 years ago. And y'all, I learned off of social media what Juneteenth was. And I was just like, wow, so much of my history I was not taught. I just think about all the possibilities and the potential. And not that I'm, in a bad place or I don't like what I'm doing in my life, but had I learned these stories as a young Black girl, I mean, I could only imagine, the capacity to which, I saw things or saw my potential, or maybe I might have even wanted to be an engineer after watching that movie Hidden Figures.
Oh, right.
Right.
Had I learned these things and knew that I could be this, and then and tapping into your question, I never felt any pressure from my family to be a strong Black woman or this or that. I was always raised to just work hard and do my best, and be a good person. I was never taught that I had to be married or have children to be considered a good Black woman. So I'm very grateful to my family and my parents for that. But yeah, I hear other stories, from friends that their parents taught them, we're teaching them, how to be a wife, how to be a mother.
I think it's really interesting, this sense of how our different backgrounds have different measuring sticks for what worth and success means. And, Sailor and I come from a different point of view because we also have immigration, as a part of that too. I also think it's really fascinating what you touched upon, Chastity, was the sense of delayed knowledge. Because what if you did have the role models of those incredible people and hidden figures, like, something about Juneteenth that struck me, and I wrote this in, one of my social media posting, was that the Emancipation Proclamation was signed 2 years before the news even spread to the enslaved in Galveston, Texas. So for 2 years, these men and women and children had no idea that legally they were free. And that is also another thing of delayed knowledge. So even when there's legislation in place, even when there are protections that are afforded to you, it doesn't mean that it reaches you. And that is a big deal. And the same thing with education with us and, our colleagues on Whiskey Dads, they had a great conversation as well about race. And I was really struck about how, our colleague Mac and Jay and we're talking about how there's certain conversations they have to have with their children being African-American dads. And it broke my freaking heart that the conversations that my parents had with me or that I think I'll have with my children is very general safety conversations. Don't speak to strangers. Don't accept, candy or food from people that you don't know. Don't walk home from school alone.
But wait, what if you have a daughter? What if you have a daughter? That's going to be different, though.
It is going to be a little different, but I never have to have the conversation of if you encounter a police officer, these are the things you have to do to make sure you get home safe.
Right.
For
that
me,
is correct.
If I was taught that if I encounter a police officer, if I do A plus B, C equals D to show that I am abiding, I am not a physical threat, I will probably come home with a citation or a ticket. An encounter with a police officer does not become the reason why I don't come home. And that is not a conversation that who knows what my children will look like. I hope they're really freaking cute. I just but depending on, the ethnicity of my children, it might not be a choice for me. If I marry an African-American man, I have to have that conversation with my children about how to interact with the police. And that breaks my freaking heart. They're supposed to be the reasons that you get home safe. They're not supposed to be the reason why your family members don't get a chance to see your face again.
Growing up for me, I was not taught that I would be okay if I was pulled over by a police officer. Not at all. I was told you do not open the window all the way, and if you're on a dark highway, don't stop, find the next exit and go into a gas station where other people are until cell phones came along. I was taught, and I don't know where this came from both my mother and my grandmother. Turns out the statistics are absolutely true, that I was in jeopardy of being raped by the police officer. And reading these statistics is astounding, absolutely astounding. And when we don't even have the numbers, because I think it's something alarmingly like 93% of the time they don't even get reported. Because who are you going to report it to, right?
Another police officer, right?
Right. Okay, that's going to work well. All of that. That's a whole other rabbit hole we can go down. But I wasn't taught the same thing. I was taught to be fearful of my safety for them. So there's like that little speck I can understand, but absolutely not as a Black person experiences in America, for sure. So I think that you don't have the same conversation based on your color and your gender.
Interesting. Yeah, that's so fascinating because, and by the way, like, just to reiterate, like, these are all our personal stories. Like, this is, we're all just talking as individuals, and like, I think there's wonderful, acts of heroism, from our first responders, our policemen. I'm not in any way generalizing and saying that if you encounter, a police officer that, something terrible happened. What I'm saying is that I have the privilege of not needing to have that conversation, or that conversation.
Does that come from you being taught that if you're submissive, you'll be okay and invisible, do you think?
I was taught that you have to follow rules. And if you follow rules, you will be okay. That if you were an anomaly, if you were outspoken, if you were overly opinionated, it was put your head down, work incredibly hard, be an academic superstar, bring financial security and acclaim to your family. And by the way, have like 3 kids and like marry a Chinese doctor and you be a Chinese doctor. You know what I mean? And I'm like, well, that's never gonna happen, Mom, Dad. It takes a lot. But I remember I was pulled over once and I was with my younger brother and I was in the city. I was thinking about this before our show and I didn't have a big infraction at all. I think I probably had like a broken taillight or something. And the police officer came, he was a man, and, he asked me to roll down my window. We talked a little bit and I left. And I remember my brother looked at me and he was like, it's because you're pretty. And I was like, what? And it's because I got away with no citation, no anything. But what I think about that now is how my little brother perceived that instant, that if you look a certain way, if you're a certain gender, if you're a certain age bracket, that you will be given preferential treatment. And I don't know, that's definitely a rabbit hole that we can kind of, go down to.
Yeah, that's a huge rabbit hole.
Huge rabbit hole. Yeah.
I think what I would like to walk away from this conversation as we begin to wrap it up with is, so what are the conversations do you think we need to have within our community? Because I have already starting, I began seeing posts that were just really inappropriate on my social media, and just reaching out to these people and being like, hey, what the hell is this? Do you want to talk about it? Or are you just a straight up racist asshole? And the response depended. And if they were just a straight up racist asshole, there was no point arguing with them. I'm like, you're out of here. And these are some people that I've been interacting with for years on social media. So it's just, it's like, oh, but I'm sorry, I'm not surprised, because I live in the real world. And some people have actually been open to a conversation and understood that the language they were using was really inappropriate, and that they were speaking from a place of privilege and had no idea what they were really talking about, but they could learn. And so that's been kind of a beautiful thing. And I think that is the whole thing that I've been getting from Fawn during this, and that I've been trying to learn and kind of pivot the way I approach things is, when she posted a video addressing the murder of George Floyd, the forever murder of Black Americans, the protests, and so forth. And she did it with a message of hope. And I won't lie to you, there was a moment in that where I was like, what? Why are we talking about hope right now? Are you looking at what's happened? And you have to get past that anger, because that's emotion, right? And of course, this is super emotional, but you do have to, I believe that you have to look at this as hope, because I believe these protests and the response is very different this time than it has been in the past. I don't see anything simple like that, of course, but I do see this as different. Those of us of a certain age have kind of been here before, right? And as angry as people got, it was squashed very, very quickly, unfortunately. That's why it's still happening. Right. So what can we do? Simply, we represent a Black-owned brand, right? That's work in itself. Literally, just by pouring these cocktails, just by selling the bottles, by educating about the brand, we are helping so many initiatives that Uncle Nearest does. So many programs that we have. We've donated probably at this point over 300,000 masks, since COVID-19. We have our Brothers Keeper program. We have our Nearest Green Foundation, which is education for the descendants of Nearest Green. We now have the Jack and Nearest Advance Initiative and the Nearest Green School of Distilling. So it's wonderful that our everyday job helps us to do this work too, socially and on a humanitarian level. But what conversations do you think would be fruitful for us as women? Because we have such a problem in this industry with women being seen as equal. I don't know how many times you've experienced being mansplained in a whiskey tasting.
Oh my God.
I mean, I can't.
Period.
Oh my God. Like, do you not think I work for the brand? Do you not think I might know at least as much as you do? Or if you think I'm wrong, can't you just err on the side that I'm right because I work for the brand? I don't know. Nope. How do we make that change in the community, do you think?
This might sound more on a macro level, but I think that sometimes it's the things that seem a little bit more inconsequential that can actually have really great ripple effects, right? So one of them was, I realized that there was a whole bunch of really awesome children's books about diversity, and we're talking skin color, gender identification, all this stuff. And I was like, it has to start from when we are around little kids. You were talking about how, like, you know, you grew up in a diverse neighborhood after you were 12 or 13. Chastity, you talked about like how much more broader your perspective was because you were able to go and be exposed to all these different wonderful individual cultures. And it's like, we could just videotape ourselves reading a children's book, giving parents time off, and just starting that. And one of the reasons why we were hired, besides our spirit knowledge, our industry experience, is our talents as storytellers. And I think that we tell the story as to adults now. We tell the story of Jack and Nearest, this improbable friendship between an enslaved man and an orphan. They were both very underprivileged people, one more than the other. Let me just make that very clear, because it was not owned. And they changed each other's lives. And I think that the story always resonated. The story always was impactful, but I think it's even more purposeful now, because that was a friendship that happened in the Civil War. You want to talk about discourse in American history?
Seriously.
You're not going to get more than that, you know, when it comes to race relations. So I think it's really having that sense of purpose already and infusing that more with how we interact when we are with our accounts, with guests. And I think also, how do we introduce that to kids? You know, whether it's like reading the books on diversity, you know, like having play dates together, or just even us having this conversation. Like, you know, maybe like, I don't look like a standard whiskey rep. I just, I don't. And neither do you guys.
None of us do.
None of us do.
That's part of the problem.
That's part of the problem. And like, you know, I just, if someone else sees us and they're like, oh my God, I love spirits. I love cocktails. I love how you guys tell the story with so much passion. How can I join? How can I learn? How can I be a part of that? You know, because with the Fred Minnick podcast that Fawn was on, you know, Tracy from Glenfiddich, she brought up such a wonderful point, which was that whiskey was the common denominator. It was the thing that put a baseline that you guys have something in common, that you both like this brown spirits. And that's when conversations can start.
Yeah.
And I think that is something we can do, and we do as brand ambassadors of Nearest.
For sure. I think we need to continue having these conversations, continue educating, you know, the people around us. And, you know, I like that, you know, I see a lot of children's books. I read children's books sometimes. I see a lot of children's books touching on these relationships and diversity and race relations. I think that's a great start. Wouldn't it be cool if we had a children's book talking about the relationship between Nearest and Jack without the alcohol, of course?
That would be, so I was thinking about that. Really that would be super adorable. And that would be so wonderful. Also, what if there was a cocktail book that taught you the history of race in the United States with cocktails? And especially like when you go down the rabbit hole, there's some cocktail historians out there that can tell you some really cool things. You know, and a lot of, and Fawn talked about this. We did a Women Who Whiskey event recently, and she talked about one of the problems with getting into the spirits industry for African Americans can be that they didn't drink, you know, very much. It was thought to be a bad thing, you know. The church didn't really condone it, you know, depending on what church you went to, et cetera. But there are so many drinks. When I was just doing all this research, you know, drinks. And like the hibiscus cocktail I made, like that was my inspiration from a traditional Juneteenth drink from the first actual Jubilee. That could be a really fun thing to do as well, you know?
I think that's a great idea. And like, if I could build upon that, I would love to do a Nearest around the world. So like right now I'm thinking, you know, my cocktail that I created that was influenced by France. And it's like, if we, you know, I love working with sherry. So that's a nod to Spain. We can work with different spirits that are native to South Africa, to Africa. Like, you know, I would love to do a Nearest.
That'd be so fun.
That That sounds really cool. I like that. We should talk more about that.
That would be super fun. I would love that. Well, let's get together again.
Yeah.
Because this was so enlightening. And I also we started collecting pictures of us from childhood, you guys. So and so I make a joke all the time about my hair, and we have to talk about this, Chastity, next time. And May, I'm going to be curious to see what where you come into this discussion, because I have a suspicion I might know, but man, did my hair define me, and was my hair cruel to me growing up, and oh my God, you could do a whole thing about ethnic hair, whatever,
yeah.
Right?
I could talk for hours about hair. Girl.
Oh my God. Oh my God. I mean, Fawn and I had a discussion about it, and she made a joke about a watermelon cocktail I sent her, and I said, Greeks are obsessed with watermelon. Did you see that? And I told her what we call it in Greek, and she said, she says, maybe you guys are black too, because you love watermelon and we have the crazy hair. And I'm like, I know, right? You see the energy there? So we definitely, I want to talk about that next time too. But this was we'll pull out the baby pictures, the kid pictures, you guys, and I have one. Oh boy. Interesting. I have one before assimilation and after assimilation, I call it. You guys saw it, the blonde one. With my overplucked eyebrows.
I think we need to give a little context about it. So Sailor in my picture, we talked about what was growing up being like the only, in a neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I was one of the only Chinese people in a predominantly Italian neighborhood. I grew up in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, and I described my childhood as like Joy Luck Club meets Goodfellas, because exactly what it was. And so I said to Sailor, I was like, I'm so curious, like what our views of what a beautiful woman was, or what it meant to be desirable. Also, like our taste in men, like was that influenced because of the neighborhood that we lived in, and how we tried to assimilate into the predominant ethnicity of the neighborhood that we grew up in. So I sent her a high school picture. Chastity, my eyebrows are overplucked, and they look like a U, and an upside down U that was smacked on my face with blonde highlights streaked across.
I gotta see this. Send it to my text.
No.
I'm gonna send it in the text.
With brown,
the lined lips,
and mauve, and then Lee press-on nails. A graduation cap with a fake white rose.
Oh, I love it.
I can imagine that in my head.
Right?
Yeah, because I remember the girls from back in high school that looked like that.
Yep.
And that was when I was my best friends at the time were Puerto Rican and Dominican. So that was my influence, and I grew up learning how to dance like bachata and salsa, merengue, and all that stuff. And Sailor's picture is quite an eyeball.
Right. Her hair like she's straight out of Jersey.
And that was, you guys, that was me taming it down. Do you know how much product was in that? Because I quickly learned, and this is that I don't know if I'll share this one, but my sister and I would flat iron our hair, but we'd be in Florida visiting my grandparents in the middle of summer. We had bell hair. We called it mushroom heads, So we would have this like very fine mist of frizz around the top. And oh my God. Victoria said she wants to join our discussion on the hair talk. So we're going to have to. Let's do it. Let's talk about hair. And then let's continue to talk about how we can open the discussion to discuss women in whiskey more, and changing that attitude, and, supporting the work that Fawn's doing to bring diversity into the whiskey business. So I think that would be perfect for next time.
Yes.
Looking forward.
Awesome. This was fun. I love you, girls.
Thank you. This is my soul. I'm so happy that we got to get together.
Cheers.
Oh, I drank all my drink.
Oh, that's right. I'll take 2 for you.
Cheers.
There we go. Well, thank you for being badass whiskey women. And thank you, everybody that tuned in and watched. We appreciate you being here. And we'll do it again, and you're going to get to see pictures. Whew. All right. Stay tuned.
Drink honorably.
Bye, everyone.
Drink honorably. And don't forget, you can order Uncle Nearest from our website, free shipping, unclenearest.com. Liquid gold is the code. But please go into your local liquor store and just ask them to bring us in. It literally is that simple. We are distributed almost everywhere. Just say, hey, can you please bring in Uncle Nearest? And that's it. And we will see you next time. So good night, everyone.
Good night.